Don Bluth, along with his longtime collaborator Gary Goldman, was the guy putting out those edgy kids movies in the 80s and 90s that always felt a little more mature than what Disney was doing at the time. Much lauded works like An American Tail and The Land Before Time that spawned piles of sequels and TV shows, all the way up to the underappreciated Titan A.E., his last work so far. Point being, there's a unique quality that a Don Bluth movie has. Aside from his iconic art style, there's also a certain atmosphere that just makes his work feel different from its contemporaries and a lot of what came before and since. So what I'd like to do today is distill that secret sauce down to the bare bones and find all those themes, tropes, plot points, and archetypes that flow through the veins of just about every single Don Bluth story. I present to you the Bluthian hero's journey. The prototypical Bluth film starts with a prologue, which gives us a sense of the rules and history of the world we are about to enter. It's usually narrated and sometimes presented as a fable or fairy tale. Here we learn all about this world's legends, the secret societies, the promised land prophecies, and the local folklore, as well as what type of magic we'll be encountering if we've got any this time. From flying to scrying to protection from dying, Bluth movies have no shortage of fantastical feats. The story's mysticism usually centers around a magical wearable item. Occasionally it's not quite magical, and sometimes they have to get a bit creative to wear it, but it's always important, and usually given to the protagonist by an older person, often a parental figure. When no magical item is available, the story might opt for a miraculous ability instead, like a magical voice or a magical hand. Also, the Bluthian prologue can establish a film as a period piece, with such varied settings as 1570s Russia, 1880s Russia, the Mesozoic era, and 1910s Russia. Lastly, by the end of this first leg of the film, we're going to get a sense of whether or not we're watching a musical. And as the odds have it, we very likely are. All but 3 Don Bluth movies were musicals, and out of those 3 outliers, one still features singing, one has a soundtrack with lyrics that might as well have been sung by the protagonist, and one has over 5,000 sequels, all of which are musicals. So now that we understand the world, let's meet the hero of the hero's journey. The prototypical Bluth protagonist is diminutive in size. They're either small because they're a child, small because they're an animal, or sometimes they are just small. However, if the protagonist is none of these things, you'll still at least find one child or talking animal elsewhere in the movie. In all likelihood, this movie's probably crawling with them. The outside world is very big to these little protagonists, so they'll need some help navigating it. That's why in these films, you'll often see a kind of scavenged punk aesthetic, a world built by the little guys off the runoff of discarded human creations. However, in their own world, our protagonist is still an outsider or an outcast, not quite ever fitting in with the surroundings or the normal people contained therein. They're often looked down upon, often just scraping by their wits, and sometimes they're just too one-of-a-kind to ever feel at home anywhere. This will certainly play a part in the recurring theme of belonging in the majority of Bluth's films. And if you think things are bad for the main character now, you just wait for the inciting incident. What would a proper Don Bluth movie be without a little childhood trauma? If you're a character in a Don Bluth movie, chances are you're getting separated from your family before Act 1 ends. Whether it's the person you look up to most getting mauled to death, you're stolen away by a cloaked figure in the middle of the night, or you're simply left to die adrift at sea as your loved ones watch horrified as you disappear from sight. Incidentally, this separation often makes the character in question literally, or at least in essence, an orphan, an often seen character type in these films. Even if they're not the protagonist, sometimes an orphan is just thrown in for good measure. But if losing your family wasn't traumatic enough, Don Bluth's characters are often also ripped from their home in some cataclysmic event. Either your home is mowed down by a tractor ransacked by the Bolsheviks, or in some rare cases, your entire planet just gets obliterated by some blue a-holes from outer space. Though it's not all bad, now you can go out and try to find a new home and a new family in the big city. And boy, do you have some good ones to choose from, as Don Bluth movies love showcasing these sprawling metropolitan areas. New York, Paris, New York again, Paris again, and all the rest. So pack up your enchanted knick-knack, little guy. It's time to leave the old farm and go on an adventure. We're heading for Act 2. On the road to self-discovery, we're bound to meet some friends along the way. But the one we're probably going to remember the best is the wacky sidekick. The wacky sidekick is almost always manic or nervous, a bird or other winged creature, and probably voiced by Dom DeLuise. But they're rarely all 3 of these at once. Sometimes they're the main character, like this nervous bird, or this nervous Dom DeLuise. And occasionally they overlap as the villain's sidekick, as long as they have a change of heart at some point. Over the scenes of bonding with our new friends, one of them might drop a new nickname, like Briz or Squeaker. This keeps things light, so we really know they're having fun. However, the Bluthian hero's journey is not all affable monikers and ornithological whimsicalities. We're going to see our fair share of the scary stuff too. First of all, a giant soulless threat will loom large over our heroes, something gigantic that cannot be reasoned with. Usually that means the forces of nature attacking in the form of relentless storms, devastating earthquakes, plunging temperatures, or a bottomless churning ocean. And let me tell you something about that last one. Almost drowning is a big part of the Don Bluth experience. Any collection of water could kill you, even mud. Characters can actually die from drowning, sometimes twice in one movie. Yet another giant soulless threat hunting down our protagonist is the dreaded unpersonified creature. That's right, we're talking about the big guys that can't talk and don't have those cute cartoonish eyes. We've got cats, we've got dogs, various aquatic animals, and any other large monstrous beasts. I'd even want to throw owls into this mix since they're portrayed as really creepy, but they might be a bit too intelligent for this section. The main problem with all of these commonplace kaiju is that they're always trying to eat our protagonist. It's a surprisingly universal issue that our heroes run into, but I suppose if you're near the bottom of the food chain, that's gonna happen from time to time. But the threats don't end there. Beyond the mindless behemoths that stalk our heroes, there's also the menacing mustache-twirling villains, always with some heinous scheme. Sometimes for glory or power, sometimes it's just because they hate flowers and sunshine. Those middle movies are a bit rough. These bombastic ne'er-do-wells will often have their own little sidekick, some fidgety little henchman. He's usually timid and is voiced by Charles Nelson Riley, but in any case, he's not so great at being a bad guy, either through incompetence or by the virtue of the fact that he's just more good-natured than his horrible boss. But aren't we all? No journey through a Don Bluth movie is complete without checking out some of his unique locations. Most prominently, there's usually one or two ooky caves or sewers or basements to slink trepidatiously through. These places are characterized by dark imagery, like creepy critters, spiderwebs, and signs of death and decay, most notably bones. Don Bluth loves a good bone. Nope. Don Bluth loves putting bones in his movies. It lets the audience know that, yes, this is a place to die. But it's also just aesthetically creepy too. Don Bluth loves this look so much, he made a whole video game that takes place completely within a dragon's lair. But for the life of me, I can't remember what it's called. But as much as we see the dank and dreary, we also see the dank and lively. Because for some reason, just about every Don Bluth movie has a scene in some kind of music venue. Maybe it's as simple as a feline-operated player piano, or as glamorous as a refined operatic player libretto. But it's almost always some kind of stage show featuring live music, usually at some nightclub, in which we might find drinking, gambling, and family-friendly debauchery. Which kind of leads me to another trait of Don Bluth movies, what I'm calling the furry gaze. In just about every movie that features talking animals or Princess Daphne, there's a scene or character that's, let's just say, they're anthropomorphized in such a way that gives the fine folks at DeviantArt plenty to work with. Okay, on to the next section. We're almost wrapping up Act 2, so by now a few of these hyper-specific scenes and songs have probably happened. First, there's the "Hooray, flying is fun" scene. It's a scene with a character who's not used to flying, getting a view of the world from above. It's not only in stark contrast to the rest of the movie, when they're craning their neck to see all of the mountainous things that tower above them, it's also a nice respite from all of the episodes of grief and terror that have been thrown at them. It's a scene that's often accompanied by a musical number as well. Strangely enough, The Secret of NIMH has one of these scenes and a song about flying, but they're not the same scene. Next, we have the "Where Are You" song, which can be grouped into two types. There's the "I Miss My Family" song, because losing your family is almost always the plot of the movie, and then there's the "I Don't Even Know You Yet, But I Still Miss You" song, which happens when an orphan is looking to connect with a family. And finally, perhaps the most unique kind of scene is the "A French Bird Singing a Song About Not Giving Up" scene. It's only happened in 2 movies, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right? After all the flights of fancy, things have to once again take a turn for the diabolical. And it's usually right before Act 3 when the obviously bad guy double-crosses everyone. Now who could have seen that coming? Not the protagonist for some reason. Variations on this beat include a not-so-obvious bad guy being revealed as the bad guy, or a slightly bad guy turning out to be kinda good. If you're lucky, you can get both in one movie. Also, if no one's been kidnapped yet in this movie, which let's face it, they probably have been, they might try to squeeze in one last kidnapping at this point to heighten the stakes for Act 3. And speaking of Act 3, finally comes the end of the Bluthian hero's journey. If we're already in Act 3, we've probably seen the troop of heroes unite for what I guess I'll call the work-together machine, which is when a bunch of small folks work together to operate a much larger machine, like a car or a giant terrifying mouse. Of course, it could simply be the classic kids in a trench coat gag, or tar if it takes place in a time before kids are trench coats. But now in the final fight of the movie, we may see, or rather think we see, one of our favorite guys get killed off. Everyone gets sad for nearly a whole 30 seconds, but it turns out okay, because the character who is assumed to be dead is in fact not dead. It's a common misconception. In fact, for some of these films, a character being assumed dead is the whole plot of the movie, or at least a good third of the movie. It's also right here at the climax where we see the magical item save the day for everyone, by either unlocking the power of the theme that was inside of us all along, or maybe just verifying that we're in the place we're supposed to be. At long last, the family and the home are restored when the protagonist gets their family and/or home back, or gets a new family and/or home. Finally, a place where they truly belong with the people they belong with. Oh yeah, and sometimes the wacky character gets a girlfriend right at the end. I guess that's nice for them. When you're a kid, being small is scary. Anything can be potentially dangerous, and the people bigger than you control just about everything. Sometimes the more people there are going around, the more lost you feel. Most threats are not even comprehensible since everything is brand new to you. The vague acknowledgement of your own mortality looms in the back of your subconscious, seeping into your nightmares. And if you don't have your parents to guide you on your way, the world feels nigh impossible to navigate. And though we'll miss them, we all have to grow up and strike out on our own, remembering what our elders passed on to us, and use it to accomplish new things. Of course, that doesn't mean without the help of friends. The people who give us new perspectives, the ones we can learn and collaborate with. We all want a place where we belong. Some of us are lucky enough to have parents that made us feel that way by default, but at some point you have to find a place in the world where you belong. You have to fight your own battles, make your own home, and choose your own family. Rewatching all of these films, it's clear to me that Don Bluth has a distinct animation style and had a unique take on children's media at a time when Disney dominated the genre. However, this is not a nostalgia channel, it's a story structure channel, and I can't sit here and tell you that all of these films were the pinnacle of cinema. He didn't even write any of his movies except for Thumbelina, and I'd consider that mid-tier Bluth at best. Thumbelina never makes any choices that get her into or out of trouble on her own. It's always some outside force taking over her life and deciding what she's going to do for the next 10 minutes, or some bystander deciding to save her from whatever danger is happening at the time. Almost every single song in the movie is just people convincing Thumbelina to change her mind about something, and it's never hard to do. And in the end, some random tertiary character saved the prince for her, and the only real choice Thumbelina makes is at the last beat of the story when she chooses which guy she's going to marry, and it just so happens to be the first guy she ever met. And of course, the less said about Rockadoodle, the better.
How sweet! That's it!
Cringe.
But even though there were some pretty questionable moments along the way, I think a lot of people still like a lot of his films. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't excited about the possibility of a Dragon's Lair movie if it ever gets off the ground. He hasn't made a film in 25 years, so I'd like to think he was waiting for something really good. Maybe a lot of these traits are less Don Bluth and more just standard for a kid's movie. Like, he didn't invent the concept of talking animals or a child protagonist. But even so, there's a lot we can learn about a director by tracking the specific tropes and themes that they revisit over their career. So if you like this hero's journey style video, let me know in the comments what other directors you'd like to see me cover. In making this video, I developed my own little weighted rubric to help determine the general Bluthiness of a movie. So if you want to know which Don Bluth movie is in fact the Don Bluthiest, I suppose I can make a video about that using math. It's a little different from the overall goal of Storyograph, so I'd like to know if that's a side quest you'd like to see us go on. And if you're watching this video because you're into those darker themes in your kids' media, I did make an hour-long video about Over the Garden Wall, and although my video output has slowed down a lot lately, I will see you in the next one.